Hey forum folks, my moniker is Donovan, and I've got a tale that I never imagined I'd have to share. It's about my family, or at least the family I believed I had until a few months ago. If anyone had asked me, I'd have described us as the epitome of domestic bliss. I resided in this snug abode on the outskirts of Boise, Idaho, with my wife, Leela, our daughter, Mia, who's 12, and a hyper little beagle named Baxter. It was a life straight out of those TV shows where everyone gets along, the kind of life that has you grinning at the thought of coming home. Or so it seemed. Lila was the kind of woman who lit up the room, always organizing block parties or baking something delectable. Mia, with her wild curls and big questioning ease, was as sharp as they come, engrossed in her books and full of hugs for her old man. Baxter, our little furball, never failed to make us laugh, always getting into some kind of mischief. We were a team, the three of us and the dog, against whatever life threw our way, or so I was led to believe. I was the guy who'd come home from work every day, throw a hearty greeting into the air as Mia laughed, and then wrap Lila in a hug that said, "I'm so glad to be back here with you." We had it all figured out, and life was good. But here's where it gets messy, folks. One evening, things started to unravel. I was looking for the local pizzeria's number on Lila's phone for our Friday pizza night, a sacred tradition in our house. However, I stumbled upon something that had nothing to do with pizza. Messages from a guy named Owen were popping out amidst the usual texts about groceries and school pickups. His texts were littered with heart emojis, winky faces, and some stuff that made my stomach do somersaults. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. I just stood there, frozen. The phone, heavy in my hand, seemed like an anchor pulling me down. Could I really be seeing this? Lila, with her laughter that filled our home, the mother of my child, sending hearts to some guy named Owen? It couldn't be right. Maybe it was a joke, a misunderstanding, a prank. I didn't want to believe it. I mean, who wants to believe that their sunshine is actually a storm waiting to happen? So, I put the phone down, the number for pizza long forgotten. I tried to act normal, but inside, I was a mess of questions and doubts. I watched Lila and Mia, wondering if I was just being paranoid. But the images of those messages wouldn't leave my mind. It was like a dark cloud had settled over our little house, and suddenly, it didn't feel so cozy anymore. I needed answers, but I was scared to ask the questions. So there I was, playing pretend in my own life, smiling through a dinner where every laugh felt like a lie. And that, dear friends, was the beginning of the end of the happy family that never was. After the pizza night debacle, I spent the weekend wrestling with my thoughts, trying to piece together the puzzle that was suddenly my life. I was like a detective in one of those old noir films, except the case was my own marriage. It felt surreal, you know? By Sunday evening, the weight of those messages was like a lead vest, and I knew I had to clear the air. I braced myself and confronted Lila. I remember my hands were shaking when I asked her about Owen. She just looked at me, her eyes wide with what I mistook for surprise. Then she laughed, not the warm laugh that usually filled our home, but something sharp and quick. She told me Owen was just a friend from her yoga class, someone who made her laugh. "You're being ridiculous, Donovan," she said, shaking her head like I was a little kid who'd said something silly. I wanted to believe her, read it. I really did. But there was something off in her smile, something that didn't reach her eyes. I tried to convince myself that it was all in my head. Lila was my wife, the love of my life, the mother of my daughter. Friends send each other emojis, right? Nothing to lose sleep over. But then there was Mia, my little girl who'd always been Daddy's biggest fan, starting to give me the cold shoulder. She was whispering with her mom, giving me these long, searching looks that made me feel like I was on trial in my own home. Every time I walked into the room, their conversation would stop. Whisper, 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 and then silence when I showed up. What really got to me was how she started locking her phone. This was the kid who used to beg me to play games on it, who didn't have a single secret. Now, all of a sudden, her phone was Fort Knox, and I wasn't allowed in. The air in the house changed. It was like walking into a room where the floor might disappear at any moment. I felt like an outsider, like I'd stumbled into the wrong story and couldn't find the exit. Was I just being paranoid? That word kept spinning in my head. Paranoid. I started second-guessing everything. Maybe Lila was right. Maybe I was just being ridiculous. Every laugh, every whisper, every look. They all became clues. But clues to what? The worst part, Reddit, was the silence. The silence when I asked how their day was and got nothing but mumbles in return. The silence when I tried to hug Mia and she gently pushed me away, saying she was tired or not feeling well. The silence in my head when I tried to convince myself that everything was okay. I started to doubt my own thoughts, my own feelings. I'd look in the mirror, and instead of seeing Donovan, the loving husband and father, I saw a stranger, a man who didn't know his own wife and kid anymore. It was like standing on a bridge, watching the water below and not knowing if you jumped, whether you'd swim or sink. Hey again, Reddit. So, where were we? Ah yes, in the thick of my own personal soap opera. I wish I could tell you things got better, but life's not in the habit of handing out fairy tale twists. I remember it was a Thursday night when I overheard that conversation, the one that turned the nagging doubts into screaming alarms. I was coming back inside from taking out the trash when I heard their voices floating down from Mia's bedroom window. I should have walked away, but I was drawn to the sound like a moth to a flame. "You should be with who makes you happy, Mom," Mia said, her voice serious and more grown up than I'd ever heard it. Those words felt like a gut punch. This wasn't some random pep talk. This was my daughter giving her blessing to what seemed like the dismantling of our family. I stood there, frozen, as the cold evening air bit at my skin. "Happy," she said. The irony of it twisted in my chest. Here I was trying to keep us all happy by playing the part of the clueless husband. A few days later, the second domino fell. I was on our home computer when I noticed it running slower than usual. Being the semi-tech savvy dad that I am, I decided to do some digital cleaning. Mia's email was logged in. She must have forgotten to log out, and there it was, a folder marked work stuff. Innocent enough, but the universe has a sick sense of humor. Curiosity got the best of me, and I clicked work stuff. Not unless her job included exchanging love letters and cozy photos with Owen, whose face was now more familiar to me than my own reflection. Each email was a hammer building a coffin for our marriage. "My dearest Mia, I long for the next time we're together. You are my true happiness." I couldn't breathe. There it was. The life I didn't know laid bare in pixelated confessionals and JPEG secrets. My heart raced, a mix of anger and heartbreak churning in my stomach. Confrontation was inevitable. This time, I had proof, solid and undeniable. So I faced Lila with her own words, the emails printed out and laid between us like a challenge. But she was a fortress. She denied it all with a fire in her eyes that I'd never seen before. She accused me of invading her privacy, of being a control freak. "Don't you trust me, Donovan?" she spat, as if I was the one who had brought strangers into our marriage. She turned my world upside down, making me feel guilty for uncovering the truth. And for a moment, a fleeting, weak moment, I doubted myself. I wondered if I was the villain in her story, the bad guy who snooped and pried and broke the sacred trust between man and wife. But no, Reddit, I wasn't the bad guy. I was just the guy who couldn't see the wool that had been pulled over his eyes, the guy who believed in a happy family portrait, not realizing it was drawn with disappearing ink. The stage was set, the players were ready, and the lies, oh the lies, were just beginning to unravel. I told Mia I had a business trip, a last-minute deal that couldn't wait, real important stuff. She kissed me goodbye with that same detached peck that had become the norm, and Lila barely glanced up from her phone to wave me off as I drove away. I could see Mia's silhouette at the window, phone already in hand. My gut twisted. I didn't head to the airport. Instead, I parked a street over in my buddy's beat-up Camaro. There I was, slouched in the driver's seat, baseball cap pulled low, heart thumping in my chest. It felt like a stakeout in my own life, which is about as messed up as it sounds. Hours ticked by, and doubt started to eat at me. What if I was wrong? What if those messages and emails were just a fantasy, a joke? But then, as the afternoon sun began to dip, painting the Boise sky in shades of fire, I saw them. Lila walked out, dressed up like it was date night. But the date wasn't with me. Moments later, Owen appeared, a too familiar stranger. My breath hitched as they met on the sidewalk, laughing about something I couldn't hear, something I couldn't be a part of. Their hands found each other, and that's when my heart didn't just break. It shattered. They were headed to Marcello's, the kind of place with cloth napkins and a wait list, the kind of place we'd saved for anniversaries and whispered sweet nothings over candlelight. I followed at a distance, the Camaro's engine a low growl beneath the city sounds. From a parking spot across the street, I watched them through the restaurant window. They picked a table, our table, near the back, with a view of the park. When Owen kissed her hand across the white tablecloth, it was like watching a scene from someone else's life. Only I knew all the lines. I wanted to storm in there, to flip tables and demand answers, but I didn't. I sat there, a silent spectator to my own tragedy, fury boiling over, hands clenched so tight my knuckles turned white. It was real, all of it. The lies, the sneaking around, the betrayal. It was as tangible as the leather of the steering wheel beneath my grip. Living in a bad dream? No, this was worse. In dreams, you wake up. There's relief. But there was no waking up from this. No escape from the sting of betrayal. It seared through me, hot and fierce, leaving me to smolder in the wreckage of what I once thought was a happy life. And there, parked in shadows with a heart full of lead, I realized the depth of the lie I'd been living. This wasn't an accident. It wasn't a mistake. It was a choice, her choice, and it torched everything. You'd think after that stunt, I'd have had enough drama to last a lifetime, but there's something about getting sucker punched by life. You either lie down and take it, or you stand up and start swinging. So I went for round 2, with the truth clenched in my fists. I waited until the next day, after the images had seared into my brain, turning every thought into a live wire. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, couldn't look at Mia without seeing her laughing it up with Owen. When I confronted her, it was with a phone full of pictures, evidence that was as clear as daylight. "This is you and Owen," I said, my voice steady as a drum beat. "At Marcello's, at our table." I watched her, waiting for the mask to slip, for the lies to crumble. Lila's face went through a gallery of emotions, shock, fear, anger, until it settled on something that looked like sorrow. "Donovan," she whispered, and there was a tremor in her voice, the first note of realness I'd heard in months. She broke down then, tears spilling over, hands shaking. The affair wasn't news anymore, but the why, it was a gut punch. "You changed, Donovan. You stopped being fun. You got so serious and dull. Owen, he's exciting. He makes me feel alive." It was as if she'd handed me the blame, gift-wrapped, like I was the one who'd pushed her into the arms of another man. I stood there, grappling with the weight of her words, feeling the ground beneath me shift. How had I become the villain in my own story? But standing there, in the wake of her confession, something within me snapped. The pain, the betrayal, the humiliation, it all merged into a singular emotion. Rage. A torrent of anger surged through my veins, drowning out the sorrow and self-doubt. In that moment, I made a choice, just as she had made hers. I left without a word, without giving her the satisfaction of witnessing the turmoil she had unleashed within me. The anger acted as a shield, protecting me from the devastation that threatened to consume my sanity. I retreated to the shadows, plotting a revenge that would mirror the depth of my pain. Days turned into weeks, and I meticulously crafted a plan to unveil the truth to the world. I hacked into Owen's email, exposing the affair for what it was, a tangle of deceit and betrayal. I collected evidence, photographs, and messages that painted a vivid picture of their clandestine romance. Then, on a fateful Friday evening, I executed my revenge. Armed with the incriminating material, I created an anonymous blog, a digital diary that chronicled the unraveling of my family. I detailed the lies, the infidelity, and the shattered trust, naming Lila and Owen as the protagonists in this tragic tale. I unleashed the story into the virtual realm, sharing it on social media platforms, forums, and anonymous confession sites. The tale of Donovan, the deceived husband, resonated with the online community, drawing readers from far and wide. The blog post went viral, a wildfire consuming the reputations of those who had played a part in my downfall. The internet became my stage, and the revelation of their affair was the climax of the performance. Messages flooded in, some expressing sympathy, others reveling in the drama of a real-life soap opera. Lila and Owen's lives crumbled under the weight of public scrutiny, their secrets laid bare for the world to dissect. As the online storm raged, I watched from the sidelines, my anger momentarily appeased by the chaos I had orchestrated. The roles had reversed. I, the victim, became the puppet master pulling the strings of their public downfall. It was a bitter satisfaction, a taste of vengeance that left a hollow aftertaste. Yet, even in the midst of my orchestrated retribution, a nagging emptiness persisted. The virtual battleground had become my refuge, a place to hide from the shattered reality that awaited me beyond the screen. The revenge, it seemed, had done little to heal the wounds within. In the wake of the online spectacle, I found myself standing in the ruins of a life that had once held the promise of happiness. The house that echoed with laughter and love now echoed with the haunting whispers of a broken family. Mia, the unwitting casualty of our war, grieved for the loss of normalcy. It was then, amid the wreckage of my relationships, that I understood the hollowness of revenge. The fleeting satisfaction it offered was nothing compared to the void left by the disintegration of my family. The digital storm I had conjured didn't mend the shattered bonds or bring solace to the ache in my chest. In the aftermath, I faced a reckoning, a moment of introspection where I had to confront the consequences of my actions. The online spectacle had exacted a heavy toll, not just on Lila and Owen, but on the remnants of my own humanity. The revenge, it turned out, was a two-edged sword, cutting through the illusions of my righteous anger and revealing the darkness within. As the virtual storm subsided, I stood before the ruins of my family. Mia, a silent witness to the drama that unfolded, looked at me with eyes that mirrored the confusion and hurt within my own soul. In her gaze, I recognized the reflection of my own mistakes, my own shortcomings as a husband and a father. The house that had once sheltered us from the world now stood as a testament to the consequences of unchecked anger and revenge. It was time to face the aftermath, to navigate the wreckage, and attempt to salvage what remained. With a heavy heart, I disconnected from the virtual battlefield, recognizing that the online spectacle was a mirage, a temporary distraction from the reality that awaited me. The journey ahead was uncertain, and the road to redemption would be long and arduous. In the quiet moments that followed, I began the process of rebuilding, not as an avenger, but as a man humbled by the complexities of human relationships. The scars of betrayal would remain, etched into the fabric of our shared history. Yet, perhaps, in acknowledging the flaws within ourselves, we could find a way to forge a new narrative, one grounded in humility, forgiveness, and the fragile hope of a second chance.